Hello everybody, my name is Maddie, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here, and welcome to this video which is going to be a slightly delayed August wrap-up. So August was like a ridiculously strong reading month for me. We started really strong because in the first weekend in August I think I did a 24 and 48 readathon, so read so much on that weekend, and then it just kind of went from strength to strength, to be honest. I have a couple stats to run you through, and then we will talk about everything I read. I'm not going to do an in-depth review for every single book, and you'll see why as we get to it, but I'm excited to tell you about all the good things I read, because not only was it strong in terms of volume, we also had some really good books. So in total, in August, I read 16 books, and some of those were manga, but only 4, which is not that much considering. So I still read 12 books, with a grand total of 5,236 pages, which equates to 169 pages a day, which is silly. That is silly. That is probably double, if not more, what I would expect to read. And if I look at all my stats for the month, this is my strongest reading month of the year by far. Like, so far. It was great. But let's talk through some of the books. So as always, in general, I'm going to go in the order I read these books, with a few exceptions, which you'll see as we go. So, first book I read in the month, not the best. The Captive Prince by C.S. Pacat. I mentioned this in a vlog, I think, when I was reading it. I know this book is problematic as hell. I read it for the first time when I was much younger and thought it was great fun. Like, it was also, you know, back in the day when I didn't know what male romance was out there, or just queer romance was out there, so this was just what I could get my hands on. And I, at the beginning of this month, just needed a trash book, something to amuse me for a bit. And so I read this, and I'm not gonna lie, it did not hold up. My plan was to reread the entire series. I will be shocked if I continue with the other 2 books. Sometimes you need a trash book to pick you up, and I have another example of that later this month, though it's not trash, like a fun, easy read that you know you love. This one did not quite achieve that because I didn't end up loving it, but we read it. This follows, basically, you have 2 warring kingdoms who have princes in both, and in one of the kingdoms the king dies and there's 2 brothers who are the princes and therefore both kind of in line to the throne. And before the younger brother even knows the king is dead, he has been kidnapped and shipped off to the other kingdom as a slave offering. This other kingdom have no idea he's one of the crown princes, and so he becomes a slave to the prince of the other kingdom. So it's like kind of, anyways, very much enemies to lovers, but it's just a really questionable. There's a lot of very interesting things in this book, which I don't know how I feel about. I read it. It's done. I have no more thoughts. I don't know what I would rate it. I read it. I probably won't continue with the series on this reread. I don't expect. We then get onto the 24-hour readathon, where I read 6 books in 2 days. One of them I don't have because I have unhauled it. Drama. But I started off with Open Throat by Henry Hoke. I would also say I did vlog this weekend, so if you want to see that, I'll link it and link it down below. So you can go watch that entire weekend if you so fancy. Starting point though, Open Throat by Henry Hoke. This is a little book written in verse, so there's not a huge amount of text on a page, and it is about a queer mountain lion. And it's just, I've never eaten a person, but today I might. It's the story of this mountain lion in LA who lives like up in the Hollywood Hills, and then, I can't remember exactly why, but ends up going down into the city, and it's just a bit of an interesting like exploration, to be honest. I can't remember now because it was almost a month ago and we know my memory's awful. But I read some very interesting reviews after reading this about like the metaphors and what it was implying, and it was a really good read. It's definitely one I'd like to read again, having some of that like commentary in mind. But honestly, it was just a really fun, interesting little read and a great way to start off a 24-hour readathon, and I think I gave this maybe 4 stars. Next up, I read Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher, which unfortunately I did not love as much as I hoped to. So many people love T. Kingfisher, and a lot of people that love T. Kingfisher love a lot of the same books as I do, so I was really hopeful this would be like a new favourite author, new favourite book. But for whatever reason, it just didn't grab me. Like, I genuinely cannot tell you what happened in this book, and I read it less than a month ago. Like, I really don't remember. It was a quest story about going to save this person's sister. That's about it. I really don't remember, which I feel like says quite a lot. It didn't suck me in. It didn't capture me. I gave it like a 3.5 because I did enjoy it whilst I read it. It wasn't bad in any way, but it just didn't do what I wanted it to do. Another one that I would definitely consider rereading in the future, because there's a possibility it just wasn't the right time, didn't quite go in the right way. But unfortunately, not my favourite. Next up, however, this is my favourite book I read this month, which is Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Huang. This book is fucking phenomenal. This is so good. I mentioned in that vlog, this was entirely like a cover buy. I was in Forbidden Planet, I thought it looked interesting. It was a floppy American edition and I read the blurb and I was like, yeah, sure, why not? But a complete random. I'd never heard of it, I'd never heard a recommendation. And I just picked it up on a whim a while ago and so decided to give it a go for this 24-hour readathon. And it's phenomenal. This follows a young woman who was at a music school and really accomplished, like, amazing. You see her history and her family teaching her music, and they've moved over to the US and what that means for them, etc, etc. And then something happens that means that she doesn't really study music anymore and decides to go a different route. And we're following that that's the present tense, we're following that as well. And she gets involved with this cosmetics company to basically be a sales rep for them. Not that dramatic, but there are some slightly dodgy things going on and mysterious things going on and no one's quite sure, and then it all gets a bit creepy from there. It's a dystopian, it's commentary on race, it's commentary on social expectations, especially on women. So many different things, honestly. It is beautiful, it is so interesting. Obviously it has the inclusion of someone studying music, which we know is one of my favourite things ever. I love this so much for so many different reasons, and I'm going to continue to go on about it. If ever there is a book you are going to hear about from me having potentially not heard of before, I don't know, maybe this book is really massive and everyone knows about it, but I hadn't come across it at all, please go read Natural Beauty. It is amazing. Trigger warnings for sexual abuse are like on the page. Sexual and medical abuse, like, warning for that. I did not see that coming. As I say, this book gets a lot creepier and a lot darker than I expected. So just go in a little bit carefully and have that in mind. Next up was the book that I no longer have, which was a graphic novel called Killing and Dying, which I think is actually a compilation of short comics that are published by this author. And I think this is like, I don't know what number volume, but it's not the only one he's done. Adrian Tomine, something like that. I really didn't like it. There were 4 stories in this bind up, and one of them was okay. The other 3 sucked. They are sexist, they are everything, and I'm sure they're meant to be doing some satirical commentary on it, but I didn't read it that way. It was boring, it was kind of grim. Do not recommend. It's really sad because it came very highly recommended to me, but I did not enjoy it at all. If anyone's read any Adrian Tomine and has a different opinion, I'd be really intrigued to hear what I wasn't getting out of it, but yeah, not the one for me. So we're going to move swiftly on to the second day of the 24 and 48, where I started with The List by Yomi Adeyoke. I don't actually know how to say that surname. I need to look that up. But anyway, this was also depressingly a bit of a flop for me. This book follows our main character, who works in journalism and specifically in a lot of like social justice kind of stuff, and is known to be, the first one to retract support for anyone that's like reported as an abuser or anything like that, like, really big on all the social justice kind of stuff. And then one day a list gets published of, men in the entertainment industry who you should avoid, don't want to work with if you're a woman, etc, etc. And her fiance is on the list, and this basically follows the fallout from that, how she responds to it. Like, does she blindly trust these accusations when, you don't know who they've come from and don't know where they've come from or what it's about? And is it as easy to blindly trust to write people off when it's someone you know personally and have had a different experience with, etc, etc? Which is a really, really interesting conversation and one that's very prevalent in today's society. However, I can't describe why this book just didn't capture me. The one thing I can definitely say, it did not need to be almost 400 pages long. It just didn't. I feel like in the first 150, I was like, we've had the conversations. We know how people are feeling. What are we going to do now for the next 250 pages? And I continued to feel like that through the rest. There were some good moments, but I felt like there were a lot of very interesting theoretical conversations around the topics I've just spoken about. and no actual opinions or conclusions drawn. And I get that, because it's not something which you can really easily be like, I think you should do X. Decision made, done. Like, the whole point is it's a big debate and there isn't a correct side in a lot of these things. But it just felt like we were having the same conversation over and over with no point to it. And I suppose the point is, you know, basically, is she going to marry him or not, given what she knows? And you do get an answer to that, but I don't know, it just felt really flat for me, which is really disappointing. I think a really interesting topic. I think if this had been like 200, maybe 250 pages, and we'd sped up the plot a little bit and got a bit further in some of the conversations, I could have really liked it, but it just didn't quite achieve what I wanted it to, unfortunately. Next up is the final book I read in the 24 and 48, and this begins my season of rereads. I don't reread a ton. Before August, I'd only reread 2 books this entire year. It is safe to say I've reread more than that now. I mean, I did reread Captive Prince, actually, but yeah, I just went on a complete reread binge after that. Don't know quite why, various reasons, but we started it off with Loveless by Alice Oseman. I've been meaning to reread this for ages. I read it when it first came out and loved it, and that held up this time. I loved it so much. In this book, you're following Georgia, who is around about 18 at the beginning of the book, just leaving school, about to go off to university with 2 of her good friends, and basically you're following her journey of her realising she is asexual and aromantic and what that means, and learning what that is, what it means for her, etc, etc. Everyone in this book is queer, near enough, as always for Alice Oseman. They also, the 3 of the friends and some other characters you meet, George's roommate is possibly my favourite character. I just love her so much. They all put on a Shakespeare play as well, and so there's a lot of theatre aspects to it, and like theatre uni societies, which is something I'm inherently familiar with. So just general really good vibes. I love it. It does a really interesting exploration of lots of different identity stuff, as well as just much gorgeous friendship, theatre, camaraderie. Great fun, and just a really fun book. It's 400 pages, but I read it in about 4 hours flat. It's a very quick read. It's fantastic. Highly recommend. Continuing reread season, Red, White and Royal Blue. I don't need to say much about this book. Everyone knows what it is. First son of the United States. Prince of England, UK, Wales, I never know which one he technically is. They hate each other. They have to pretend to be friends. Oh look, they fell in love. I'm saying this as if I don't absolutely adore this book. Look at this. I love this book with every fibre of my being. I wanted to read it again before the film came out, so that I could have this like image imprinted on my mind once more before I get all the film imagery on it. I have watched the film as well, which it was good. It wasn't what I wanted, it was fine. But I love this book. 5 stars. I've read it a million times. This is my 4th read of it. I put more tabs in every single time. There's nothing more to say. Now is when we're going to deviate from the order in which I read things, because over the next sort of half of the month, I read 3 books from a series, 4 manga, and then 1 other book. So we're just going to do the series first, because I don't want to review every single one of these separately. And that is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. So I read, they're in the wrong order, A Darker Shade of Magic, A Gathering of Shadows, and A Conjuring of Light. I'm just going to hold up the first one because they're quite chunky. I mentioned in my TBR for August and for September, oops, that I have an arc with The Fragile Threads of Power, which is the new book in V. Schwab's kind of this world, but it's a new trilogy. And so I wanted to reread the original trilogy first, which I did. I read it over about, well, I read the first 2 within about 2.5 days, and then I read the 3rd one over about 2.5 weeks. And in my most recent vlog, or a recent vlog, I don't know exactly what order these are going up in, I'll link it, you see me finish off all the Conjuring of Light in one day. But this series follows Kel, mainly, who is a person that can move between worlds, and in this world of Dark Shade of Magic there are 4 Londons, red, black, grey and white, and he can travel between them. He's an Antari, only a few people can travel between these worlds, and there's lots of magic and politics and all sorts of things, loads of amazing characters. Genuinely a fantastic series, I love it so much. Without question, A Gathering of Shadows is my favourite. Like, no question, this is my favourite book, because it has the competition tournament trope. I love them all. They're really good. The characters are fantastic. The writing is great. The world's super interesting. I think I tend to give all the books in this series, I think it's like 4.54. Even though, as a whole, it's like a favourite series for me. It's a bit of a weird one. I love the whole series, but none of them are quite 5-star reads for me. But I've read them all, got through them all. I'm excited to get to Fragile Threads of Power very soon. The one other book I read I don't currently have with me because I've lent it to my friend Emma to read on holiday and I haven't got it back because she's still reading it, is Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. I read this once already this year. I wanted something fun, so I read it again. I love this book so much. It is a top tier romance. This book follows Anastasia and Nate. Anastasia is a figure skater, Nate is an ice hockey player, and they both go to the same university where there's 2 ice rinks, but because of a prank gone wrong, one of the ice rinks gets ruined, and therefore the 2 teams, the ice hockey team and the figure skating team, are going to have to share a rink. But they've both got big stressful deadlines, so they're not particularly thrilled to be sharing, Anastasia particularly. So she kind of takes this out as a bit of a personal vendetta on Nate, and he's their, you know, big, not a himbo quite, but like a goofball hockey player just trying to win her round. It's a fantastic romance. It's so human and so real and much more grounded than a lot of romances. There's no over-the-top silliness. Like, yeah, they have some moments where they get into arguments, but they resolve it like adults and talk about it. There's no big third act breakup. Yes, there's miscommunication, but again, it's resolved with a conversation like you would expect. Just a generally fantastic book. The sequel, Wildfire, is coming out, I think, this month or next month. And there's going to be 3 or 4 books, I think, in total in the series following different friends from the friendship group. And I'm exceedingly excited to read Wildfire, so thought a reread of Icebreaker was in order anyway. 5 stars, love it. One of my favourite romances of all time. And then finally, I did read 4 manga in, what month was it? August. First up, Black or White Volume 6. Unsurprisingly, I've spoken about this series before, given by the fact it's volume 6, which I think is the last volume currently out in English, so I'm up to date on this, which is quite nice. This follows 2 men who have known each other since school, met doing theatre at school, and one of them had always wanted to work in film and TV, and the other one kind of decides to. And they have varying levels of success, deserved, not deserved, etc. And they're really good friends that live together, and there's definitely nothing else going on. They get together in the first book, and then you get a lot of conversation about them having to hide their relationship to maintain like the professional success they might have given the world they live in. Really interesting. A lot of manga has questionable consent, and that was very true in the first few of these books, but I'm just realizing that's very common in manga. But it has resolved by this one, and this was actually by far my favourite volume, like 5 and 6, I've loved. They've suddenly like turned a corner and have got even better. So really excited to continue this series. I'll inevitably reread volume 6 when volume 7 comes out, but yeah, really good fun. And as always, it has some kind of setting to do with acting and having a craft, which I love. I then read The God and the Flightless Messenger, which was a random cover by. I also mentioned this in a vlog. I didn't love this one. It was a little bit disappointing. It's a really cool concept. You have this kind of messenger here who basically can't do anything because he's got these tiny wings and he can't fly. And he's finally given a god to take care of, which is like the thing that everyone wants. And he gets this weird little fluff ball, which you can see here. And then you get into a bit of like, has he known this thing before when he was younger? It feels like they've met before. And it kind of turns into a romance. I'm not gonna lie, given the length. It just was a bit... It's just strangely told. I don't know. I didn't love it. A lot of manga is very, like, cut, jumpy, whatever. But this one just didn't flow. So I didn't love it. But I read it. And, you know, there you go. We did it. It's good enough. But yes, certainly not a new favourite. And then, continuing the rereads, I reread the first 2 volumes of I Hear the Sunspots. I love this series so much, and a 6th volume has just come out, but I read them a very long time ago, so I'm rereading them so I can read volume 6. So I read I Hear the Sunspots and Theory of Happiness, which is that one there. These follow, again, 2 guys in college, so in university age, one of whom is hard of hearing / deaf, and the other is just fucking chaotic, honestly. And the chaotic one ends up becoming a note taker for the other character, and a kind of friendship then romance blooms from there. And there's loads of commentary on disability in Japan in this, which is really, really interesting. I love this series. I'm excited to read Limit 1, 2 and 3 and then Four Seasons number 1 when I get to it. But that is all of the books. I'm going to try and pick the stack up. So, very much not in order. Oh my god. But that's the whole stack. It's really chunky. As I said, I did some good reading in August. Okay, it's back down. But yeah, fantastic reading month. Obvious highlight. Please go read it. Please. You won't regret it. And obvious lowlight being Killing and Dying because I got rid of it. I don't own it anymore. Which says quite a lot if I've got rid of it within a month of reading it. But yeah, overall really successful. Really happy with that, and long may it continue, though I don't expect it will continue at quite this rate. But we'll see. But anyway, that's it for the video. If you've watched all the way to the end, post kind of like a needle emoji or something, because it kind of fits with the cover of this. I don't know why, but it's what we're going with. And give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more from me, all that jazz. But that's it for the video, so bye, I'll see you in the next one.